Meet Karen. Karen comes from a well-to-do family, and she grew up in the suburbs, and she was used to getting whatever she wanted. She was young, pretty, college educated, and married to a doctor. To those on the outside, it looked as if Karen had the perfect life. She even had 2 kids with her husband, Jim. One day, Karen was out grocery shopping with her 2 children. While driving home, she noticed her husband's car parked outside of a motel. She was shocked, so she pulled over and waited outside with her children. Then about an hour later, Jim comes out with his arm around a woman. Not just any woman, but a black woman. Her name was Rhonda. He looked so happy, smiling, holding her hand like he was in love. Karen jumped out of the car and confronted them. Jim was shocked to see Karen. He quickly let go of Rhonda's hand and started to explain. Karen was crying hysterically, yelling at him and telling him he would pay for what he did to her. Later that day, Jim came home and he got his stuff, and then he went and he stayed at a hotel till things cooled off. Then a week went by and Jim hadn't came home or called, and Karen started to miss him. So she went up to the hotel where he was staying at. She walked in and knocked on the door, and to her surprise, that black, floozy Rhonda answered his door. When she saw Karen, she didn't say a word. She just smirked at her and yelled, "Jim, it's for you." When Jim saw her, he said, "What are you doing here? It's over between us, and I want a divorce." Karen just left. She was crushed. She went to her car and just cried, hoping Jim would come out to comfort her, but he never did. They did end up getting a divorce, and Karen got the house and custody of the kids. He was ordered to pay child support and alimony, but Karen was still bitter. She blamed black people and interracial relationships for breaking up her marriage and ruining her life. And now, years had went by, and she was no longer the young, pretty woman men sought after. She was now in her 30s, slightly overweight, and with 2 children. Karen joined the neighborhood watch, and this gave her a sense of power. And then a black family moved into the house down the street, and this made Karen angry. She hated to see how happy they were, and always barbecuing and having company come by. Karen wasn't going to tolerate this, so she called the police and said they were making too much noise and disturbing the peace. When she saw that they only got a warning and they still seemed happy, Karen took it a step further. She began to call code enforcement to report how they left their trash cans out on the front. Code enforcement came by and then ticketed the family. This gave Karen a sense of satisfaction. Then one night, Karen was on this dating app, and a black guy inboxed her. His name was Tyrone. He was good looking, and even though Karen had a dislike for blacks in general, she always fantasized about what it would be like to have a black man sexually. So she messaged him back and began talking. They then met up at a bar, drank a few drinks, and got a room at a nearby hotel. Karen didn't waste any time. She wanted to feel what it was like to be with this black man. So she unzipped his pants and was amazed. She immediately went down on him without even asking. This was the best she had ever had. It was rough and powerful. And when they were done, Karen got up and left, telling him she had to pick up her kids. But on her way home, she drove past her husband's house and saw him and Rhonda, his new black wife, sitting outside looking at the stars. And this made her furious all over again. She got home and looked in a mirror, and she noticed she had hickeys on her neck and chest. Then this gave her an idea. She took a hairbrush and hit herself upside the head and gave herself a big knot on her head. She punched herself in the mouth and gave herself a busted lip and bloody nose. She already had a bruise on her wrist from him holding her down during the rough sex. And then she dialed 911 and reported that she had been beaten and taken advantage of by her date that night. She began to even cry hysterically. It was like she started to believe the lies that she was telling. They quickly found Tyrone and arrested him. He claimed he was innocent, but he was still put in jail, and because his bond was so high and he couldn't afford to get out, a month went by. But with the thorough investigation and with the surveillance cameras at the bar and the hotel lobby, which showed Karen all over Tyrone, they dropped the charges and he was set free. Karen was furious. By now, she had convinced herself that he really had took advantage of her that night. She began to share his mugshot on social media, claiming that justice was not served and he should be in prison. Then Karen brought a gun and she got a conceal and carry license. And in her mind, she was a victim and the blacks were out to get her. Karen took her kids to a neighborhood swimming pool and she sipped on a couple of cocktails while she watched them swim, when she noticed a couple of black kids swimming too close to her children. So she screamed at them, telling them, "Get away." And their parents were nearby and they heard what was going on. And they told her this was a public pool and their kids were free to swim wherever they wanted. Karen told them this pool was for white kids and told them to go back to the ghetto where they came from. They responded saying that they could swim here if they wanted and wherever they wanted, whether she liked it or not. This made Karen angry, and she already had a few drinks in her, so she went into her purse and grabbed her gun and pointed it at the family. And then she got on her cell phone and called the police. She said her life was being threatened, and she even started to cry while she was on the phone. The whole time she was pointing a gun at this family. Then she noticed a surveillance camera pointed directly at her. So she hung up the phone and ran and got into her car. She was in such a panic, she forgot her kids, and she left them there. Now she was driving in tears. She drove over to her ex-husband Jim's house and ran up to the door and started banging on it. Her ex-husband answered the door and said, "Why are you here? And where are the kids?" She told them the kids had been kidnapped by some black guys that were trying to take her car. He immediately grabbed the phone to call the police when he saw on TV his kids at the pool. A news crew was now there, and they said police were looking for a woman who left them. And that same woman had pulled a gun on a family there. He said, "Karen, what in the heck did you do?" Karen, she said, "Please take me back, Jim. We can be a family again." He said no. So she reached into her purse and pulled out a gun. She shot him once in the shoulder, and he began to run as she fired over and over, missing him until her gun was empty. What Karen didn't realize was that his wife was in the next room, and she came out with a gun of her own, and she shot Karen in the chest one time and then called police. Both Karen and her ex-husband survived the gunshot wounds, and Karen's children were taken away and given to their father Jim. And Karen was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And to this day, when asked what happened that day, she still says the black men did it.